Our first guest is Christopher Maloney. Chris is an independent documentary filmmaker whose credits include The Death of Andy Kaufman, Cole, and most recently Crypto Trip. For Crypto Trip, an exploration of cryptozoology in America, Chris set out on a good old-fashioned all-American road trip visiting over 20 states to interview people who have reported creature sightings, including accounts of Mothman, Bigfoot, and Thunderbirds. Combining these interviews with his travels on the road, Chris has crafted a unique portrait of the United States. You can check out his website at cryptotrip.com. He's got a new film project coming up. We're going to talk to him. Let's go ahead and get him on the line. Chris, good evening. Welcome to AM 630 and the Fringe Radio Show.
My pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you for taking your time and spending some time with us tonight. I found your website intriguing and your work intriguing, Chris. How did you get into if you could give our listeners a little bit of a backstory, how did you get into filmmaking and especially some of these very unique topics?
Well, I loved film from the time I was a kid. I think a lot of people do, but where it was different for me was that I had sort of this, I would watch a movie, and then the really, really good ones, it would sort of bring about this pain in my heart because I wasn't a part of the movie itself. I was on the outside looking in, and so I wanted to change that. And so I just kind of followed that inclination and started learning about what it is that makes a film work and learning about how it's really a collaboration of a lot of people working to tell the same story. And that's what's been driving me for a lot of years. But as far as the type of movies that I do, similar to your radio show, the approach. As far as the documentaries I've done, especially like The Death of Andy Kaufman and Crypto Trip, the common theme is that it's something that has to do with a mystery, something that has to do with possibilities, and I think documentary film is the perfect way to explore things like that.
Well, and the thing is, kind of like our show is, like with your films, is to look out of the box a little bit and be a little bit open-minded. The one thing I think, and maybe you've had this happen to you, and it's something that in the few years we've been doing this show, is you get a lot of people that have interest in these subjects. And then, of course, you get some people that think it's nothing but pure craziness, and why are you wasting your time? I mean, I've heard that before. But I feel sort of like you want to get involved, be a part of it, just as we do here with our show. It's to educate those who want to be educated, as far as, not that I can provide an education, but I can provide bringing people on the show and talking about some of these subjects that are a little bit out of the norm, because I think there's a lot of people that are interested in it, they just don't want to admit it.
Yeah, it's important to, on things like this, to have a forum going, to let a lot of people express their opinions in a civil way, and then let people who are listening in sort of come to their own conclusions. Exactly.
We got a lot of questions sent in for you, but with Crypto Trip, what inspired you to go down that road? Bigfoot is kind of like ufology, is one of those subjects that there have been so many people that have cited these creatures. Of course, there are a couple things now in the media. This one gentleman, I think his name is Rick or Rob Dwyer. He's one who claims to have actually killed one, and supposedly the thing is on display. I know that I've talked to some of the more serious, not the serious, but the serious Bigfoot researchers. They feel it's just a hoax and a money-making attempt. But these are tough subjects, Chris, because it's just like like ufology. I think that the majority of people have seen something in the sky. I believe that the majority of people believe in these things, but until there's a flying saucer in the Smithsonian, or if there is a Bigfoot, in the Smithsonian or wherever, these are tough. They're a tough call, because it's a lot of it, of course, is based on research and taking a lot of people, at their value. What inspired you to go the Bigfoot path?
Well, cryptozoology has been sort of an interest of mine since I was a kid. I remember checking out a book from the school library about the Loch Ness Monster and kind of flipping through it and seeing that there were people that took, grown men who took it seriously. And that was interesting to me, that it wasn't just a joke. It wasn't something that everybody just laughed off. Maybe most people did, but there were some people taking it seriously. And that sort of stuck with me, in the back of my mind. And then the last few years, there's been such a resurgence of interest in cryptozoology. It's, television shows and books. It's just becoming very mainstream all of a sudden. So it seemed like the right time to explore that. And like what you're talking about, there are so many people who are never going to be satisfied until there's a dead Bigfoot in front of them or spaceship in front of them. And I knew that I, alone, setting out to make a movie, I could not find definitive proof on these things because more intelligent people than I have gone out and tried to find evidence, and people still aren't convinced. So the point was not to really go for proof. The point was to gather stories and give people who have seen these things the respect to tell their stories the way that they actually happened. And so that was really the driving force behind Crypto Trip, and we ended up gathering a lot of people who, as far as I can tell, are telling the truth.
Now, when you set out to do your looking at your website at cryptotrip.com, could you give us a little bit of the detail? You went around and visited 20 different states, so this is not like you went to one or two places. I mean, this was a serious research project. In interviewing all these different people, and obviously you interviewed a lot of, I would assume you interviewed a lot of cryptozoologists. This is a pretty big feat to accomplish, Chris.
Yeah, it was an interesting way to see the country. What I wanted to do was do it mostly on the road, mostly from a car, and that's what we did because it just seems like it's just a really American idea to, the road trip is like an American thing, and Bigfoot is like America's monster. So it just seemed like those two things went hand in hand to me. And I started out, one of the first things I did was I drove down to West Virginia because the Mothman Festival was happening there. That's something that happens every year for the last 10 or 12 years, something like that. And I found that event, and then we ended up going up to Maine, where the Cryptozoology Museum is, and Lauren Coleman did an interview, and then it just kind of trickled down from there. It went down to Massachusetts and through New England, eventually to Florida to interview someone who had seen the skunk ape, and then through Montana, and then kind of the finale of the film, our final trip was a trip to Bigfoot country in Northern California. So it was a very interesting way to see the country, and it gave me a chance to meet a lot of people that I never would have been able to meet.
How many researchers did you meet with, Chris?
People on the research side, well, that's an interesting question because most of the people I interviewed were eyewitnesses. However, a lot of people who are eyewitnesses become so interested in what they've seen that they become researchers. So now people who are like strictly researchers, people like Lauren Coleman, are, on the one hand, but then on the other hand, there are people like Todd Neese and Robin Swope who saw things like Bigfoot and UFOs and then used those sightings to sort of fuel their interest in becoming researchers. So a lot of eyewitnesses eventually become researchers, either amateur or professional.
Right. Oh, very interesting. We got quite a few questions emailed in for you today, Chris. If we could run a few by you just to get your take on them. It says, Through your research and in talking with different people, how many species of Sasquatch or Bigfoot or Yeti, how many species do you think there are out there? Do you think there's quite a few?
In the United States?
Yes.
Well, I'm not sure, because I know that there's a school of thought that sort of separates things like skunk ape in the South from the traditional idea of Bigfoot in the Pacific Northwest. And then there were other people I spoke to who they see things like skunk ape and grassman and Bigfoot. They see that as different names for the same species.
Right.
Now, what I will say is that now there are evidently Bigfoot sightings in every state in the United States except for Hawaii, I think, on record. But the place where I find it most feasible that there is a population still living would be in the Pacific Northwest, because when we were there, just sort of driving through the forest, these very remote areas, there were places in the wilderness where I couldn't even begin to fathom how I, as a human being with technology at the ready, I couldn't figure out how I would even get into these places, let alone explore them to the point where they would become encroached and send a species of Bigfoot running away. I mean, I can definitely believe that they're still there and active, and that there's a thriving population.
When you were doing this film, did you actually go out and do some I don't want to call it hunting, but did you go out and actually try to capture some evidence? I mean, did you actually submerge yourself into the research?
A little bit, yeah. Part of what I wanted to do was to interview the eyewitnesses as much as possible, not like in a sanitary studio environment, but actually in the places where they had seen these things. So I tried to do that. More often than not, I went out with the eyewitnesses, and they would take me to the spots where they had seen these creatures, and they would explain to me, this is where I was standing, this is where I saw it. And that was important because there's a certain sense or an energy that sort of resides in places where something extraordinary has happened. And I wanted to capture that on film. But in Florida, actually, the witness's name is John Bresnahan, and he estimates that he's encountered the skunk ape about 9 times. Now, he hasn't seen it all those times. Sometimes it's been just that he's heard it or he's found evidence from it. But he managed to find a hot spot deep in the swamp where apparently there was a population of them because he kept running into it in the same area. And he took us to that place and let us observe him as he was going about trying to capture sounds and other types of evidence. So we got to be right there in the middle of the night out in the swamp where this thing had crossed his path, which was very interesting and very exciting.
Wow, very interesting. When you interviewed these people, the different people to make your film, one thing that I get the sense of, and it's just like any of these fringy subjects, you know, whether it's cryptozoology or ufology or even paranormal research. One thing that I seem to encounter, especially when you start to work with some of these different groups, there seems to be a lot of, how do I put it in a nice way, Chris? There's a lot of politics always going on in the back. You know, there's a little bit of backstabbing, and you know, this guy knows what he's doing, and she doesn't, and he does. That's one thing here. We've had a couple of different groups in the Salt Lake City area that have done the Bigfoot research, and it's always the politics that seem to get into the way. But I guess what I'm asking is, did you sense any of that, or did you feel that the people you interviewed were all pretty much, you know, true researchers? And did you get a sense in filmmaking, and just as doing radio show interviews here, Did you come across some individuals that you felt were maybe, not quite telling the truth or a little bit of hoaxing?
Yes to both of those.
Okay.
Yeah, it's strange because it's in a way, it's such a subculture, and it wouldn't have crossed my mind that politics would play into it, but it does. I went to the Bigfoot conference in Ohio to show a clip of Crypto Trip last year, and it seemed like some cryptozoologists were on this side of the room, and others were on this side of the room, and these people were saying something about that guy over there and that sort of thing, and actually Lauren Coleman was there that weekend, and he gave a presentation, and part of the presentation was about how, as cryptozoologists, it was their duty to stop doing things like that. That he said we're eating our young. There may be research that you don't respect, and that's fine, but we have to remain civil, and we have to respect each other, and that was good. It was a step in the right direction. But as far as people not being genuine or having ulterior motives, I came across that a couple times. And for example, there was one guy who I was going to be interviewing about a lake monster in North Carolina, and I talked to him a couple times on the phone, and I was actually planning a trip down there to interview him, and he sort of let it slip that the lake monster idea was something that he and a few other people had come up with just as a way to boost tourism in the area. So that canceled the trip, because that was exactly the opposite of what I was going for. What I was looking for was people who, as far as they know, are telling the absolute truth. So anybody who I felt like didn't fall into that category, there was just no room for that in the movie.
Yeah, because again, it's same here. It's the time wasters, and again, I think that sometimes I don't want to call them hoaxers, but I think a lot of people, I like to use a little nicer term and say it's wishful thinking on their part. Kind of again with this guy that's going around the country with. With this supposed dead Sasquatch, it discredits so much. We had ufologist Rich Hoffman on the show last night here for a couple hours, and he works for MUFON, very serious about his work, and it's all these YouTube videos and the photoshopping, and of course anybody now with a fairly up-to-date PC can create an online movie, and it really discredits everybody else. It just again there's such fragile subjects to begin with, and then when that kind of garbage appears on the scene, it just makes things that much tougher for everybody.
Yeah, I think what's annoying about it is that it's such a waste of time.
Right, exactly.
Because, I know other people I've met who are very serious about cryptozoology have, felt it was their duty to at least check out this guy Dwyer's so-called corpse just to see for themselves. And, of course, they come back saying it's fake. But just the fact that they take the time to go and see it for themselves, that's a total waste of time. Exactly.
What are your thoughts? And I don't know if you did any research into this, but I would assume you have. Did you look into or meet any of the people that have done a lot of research and work with the Patterson film?
Well, I went to the place where the footage was captured, actually, in Northern California, at Bluff Creek, and there's a still from that film in our movie. But that's something it's stood the test of time. Things like that guy Dwyer that you mentioned, and some of the other hoaxes that have come out in the last few years. They come and then they go away right away because people see through them. But the Patterson Gimlin footage, that still hasn't been debunked as far as I'm concerned. That still can't be disproven. I think it's my opinion that that's the best photographic evidence of a Bigfoot ever taken. I think that's the real deal.
Yeah, we had Jeff Hilling on the show, and he's up in Wisconsin, in the backwoods of Wisconsin, and of course he's a cryptozoologist. Jeff's a man of very few words. I should say he's hard to interview, but boy, he is so to the point. He's dedicated his life to getting out into the Wisconsin wilderness, if you will, to look at different things. And he wrote a book about the Patterson film, and pretty much the guys that know what they're doing, and again, that take it to heart and take it with seriousness. They're all, in that 95% chance that it is. I mean, of course, there are some people that'll debunk it and hoax it and say that, it was a suit. And again, it's such a tough subject, Chris, and that's why my hat's off to you on this film, because of these type of subjects, to get out there and do the research. And I think what you do is kind of like what we do. That's something that's also needed. Just a film idea for you is I've interviewed hundreds of ufologists, and it would be great to have a film. We see different films about different ufologists, like Grant Cameron and Stanton Friedman and all these different people. But to have somebody like yourself that pulls it all together and gives the overall picture is very educating.
Yeah, well, I think what kind of struck me about it, well, I will say, going into it, I wanted to collect these stories about cryptozoology because cryptozoology is interesting to me, and I know it's interesting to other people, and I expected to do that. What I didn't expect, and what ended up happening, was that I found this community that cryptozoology has brought together, because when you see something that is out of the ordinary and it makes an impact on you, it sort of sets you apart somehow. And these people who have been set apart by these creatures have sort of found each other and found a way to support each other. And there's this really cool community that exists because they've seen these things. And there's, like you said, there is some politics that goes into it and that sort of thing, but mostly what I found was a real brotherhood of these people.
With one question I had for you too here, Chris, was, and you might have mentioned this, but with all the people that you interviewed about this subject, the ones that you felt were true, did any of them indicate? I mean, did you come across anybody that said, "Hey, look, I've seen these things on multiple occasions, and maybe even know where there's where they are, but yet they didn't want to give away any kind of a location at all"? Because I've had, over the years, I get a lot of emails. I could probably do a show on all the interesting emails I get. I got an email from a couple down in Alabama who claim that they have a refuge, and didn't want really to go on the air with their names or nothing, and I respect them. I surely wouldn't. But I've gotten a couple of these emails of people that claim that, I'm not saying that they're in captivity, but there are, again, supposedly some people that I've encountered that claim that they could literally take you to them. Again, whether it's wishful thinking or they're hoaxers, I would hope that by the amount of time they've spent in some of these emails, I've received some emails that are 4 or 5 pages long, all kinds of unique descriptions. I could think of a lot better things to do with my time than write long emails to people. But again, I don't know. I don't know if you came across anything like that, or if you had a sense that people knew where somewhere they might be, or where these things may be, and yet they were trying to protect them, if you will.
Right. There actually was somebody. He didn't end up being in the movie. He thought about it, and we just didn't end up being able to make it work. But he saw what he described as a pterodactyl when he was a kid. And some people would call it Thunderbird and so forth. But he talked to me about that sighting, and he still lived in the spot where he had seen it as a kid. And he said it was, from what he could tell, there was a population of these pterodactyls that came back every year in the woods close to his house. So that's something actually I kind of regret not being able to go and see for myself. But
Right.
There are those people out there definitely who they know where to look, and the respectful ones, you're right, they're not, they don't want to give it up, and I think that's good.
When you one question, Bill from upstate New York writes in and says, Chris, have you ever thought about possible sea life cryptozoology, like giant squids or the Montauk monster? Did you do any research into sea-based or water-based creatures?
I did. One of the first people I talked to was Sandra Manzi. She's the lady who has the famous photograph of Champ from Lake Champlain.
Right.
And that was interesting. She has a very interesting story. And actually, my first love with cryptozoology is the Loch Ness Monster. So that's definitely on my radar. And a lot of different lakes in the United States have their own version of lake monsters. There was one in Lake Tahoe called Tahoe Tessie. I'm sure you've heard of.
Yes.
And I came across, in my research, this story about Jacques Cousteau, who investigated it and swam down and came back up to the surface and said, the world isn't ready for what's down there. And that idea has always sort of haunted me. But I definitely think some of these lakes are large enough to have creatures like that in them.
Well, and you talk about the greatest hoax when we talk about the Loch Ness Monster. Wasn't the original, I know that's been debated a little bit, but the original picture of the Loch Ness Monster taken, some 80 years ago, the two brothers finally came forth a couple years ago saying that humped creature was just nothing more than a piece of plywood in a black and white picture. Again, same
Right.
thing there. Look at how many years of belief and time and dedication put into it. Was put into the research of that. And I do believe that there is something. I tend to believe there is something more to the Loch Ness because they made a little fake plywood toy or whatever and took a photo of it. There have been so many researchers that have seen things, and there are people, thousands of people that have reported things. So I kind of doubt that a photo would tend to tempt thousands of people to tell stories. But again, talk about the great hoax. The disinformation. Again just stuff like that. I can only repeat so many times that just kills it for everybody.
Yeah, that's a very well-known hoax. But I think that just the fact that it remained, not debunked for all those years shows how excited people get about that possibility. I think people deep down really want to believe that we live in a world with all these undiscovered creatures, and really we do. New species are discovered all the time, and these photographs like that really capture our imagination. It's kind of a shame when they are proven not to be true.
Oh, exactly, without a doubt. Chris, we've got to take a quick commercial break. And on the other side, I would like to talk to you a little bit about your film, The Death of Andy Kaufman. That's another interesting subject. And then you've got a new project coming up. We'd like to talk about that. Where can people get your film? Can they get it at CryptoTrip.com?
That's right. Yep, they can find the DVD at CryptoTrip.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Fringe Radio Show. Our guest tonight is Christopher Maloney. Chris, again, thank you so much for giving us some time this night and talking about your work.
Not a problem.
Andy Kaufman. There's another fringy subject. Could you tell us a little bit about the film that you made? And again, and maybe here's the big question: your thoughts on, did he really hoax his death? Do you think he's still alive, or do you think he's long gone?
Right. Well, I'm a big fan of his. That's really where the whole thing started. And when I got out of film school, I was sort of, I don't know, it had been, well, when I was in high school, the 20-year anniversary of his death happened, and there was a lot of talk about it possibly being a hoax. And then when I got out of film school, I just sort of gravitated toward that discussion again and realized there was enough material there and enough people who really believed in it to sort of explore it through films. That's how it came about, and it started out being sort of a search to find out if it was plausible that he faked his death, and really ended up being more of a search into who the real Andy Kaufman was, and both of those are a great mystery.
I would assume you probably like the Jim Carrey film.
Not really, no.
Okay.
Then the reason is because the thesis of that movie seemed to be that there was no real Andy, that he was always in character. And what I found from doing my research and speaking to his friends and family is that there was a real Andy. He was just a great performer. And sometimes it's more fun to think that he was, a little bit crazy or a total enigma, but I think in his heart he was just a sweet guy who was really, really talented and really, really ahead of his time.
Do you believe that he's still with us, or do you believe that he's gone?
That's something that I go back and forth on, honestly. A few months ago, there was news about that whole thing again because someone showed up at the Andy Kaufman Awards, which is something that Andy's brother facilitates every year. And Andy's brother was there, and this young woman came up and said that she was Andy's daughter and had received letters from him and that whole thing, and Andy's brother was on CNN, and that it just proves that there's still interest in that topic, but as always, there's just not a definitive answer.
Yeah, I mean, I did enjoy the Jim Carrey film. One thing I thought it did, and I do agree with you. I do agree that it kind of made him out to look like he was always hoaxing all the time. And I believe you had to enjoy his type of humor, which I did some I didn't. I mean, he definitely did cutting edge things, going out on stage in front of a bunch of people and putting out a little record and singing there with it. I mean, that was, in that day, and even today, that is definitely out there in left field. So I give the guy a lot of credit because he did so many out in left field type things. And that's what also kind of makes me believe that maybe, I don't know, maybe it is true. Maybe he just had enough. I don't know how true the Jim Carrey film was as far as his antics went and how he got upset all the time, because the film definitely portrayed him as somebody that was kind of a little unstable and angry all the time. And I don't, maybe you could talk on that a little bit. I don't know if that was really true or it was in real life. But again, he did some really cutting edge things.
Yeah, I don't think he was angry really at all for the most part, because he was a devout practitioner of transcendental meditation, and he had total control of his inner life, I think, and he credited that with a lot of what he was able to achieve as a performer. But near the end of his life, and I'll say that in quotes, there was a series of things that happened all in a row that it could make you believe either that he did come to his breaking point and he decided to fake his death, or he came to his breaking point and just kind of died because he couldn't face it anymore. I mean, he did get kicked off of Saturday Night Live, and career-wise, things weren't going so well. He had gotten really into the wrestling thing, and people just weren't ready for it. So he was doing these wrestling venues, but nothing really mainstream, nothing enough to keep his career going in a serious way. So, yeah, you could argue that he kind of came to the point and saw he had nothing to lose and wanted to fake his death, or all of those things in a row just kind of leveled him to the point where he lost his strength and passed away.
Yeah. Did you have an opportunity? You know, I've not really been into wrestling that much, but I've seen different interviews with Jerry Lawler, who's of course part of the WWE or whatever they are today, WWF organization. Did you have an opportunity to talk with him?
I didn't talk with Jerry Lawler. I did talk with Andy's dad and Andy's brother, and both of them, you know, Andy's brother said to me, and he's interviewed in the movie, he said, Andy's gone. He's been gone for a long time, and I've accepted that. On the other hand, there's nothing in this world that's impossible. If he was still around and showed up tomorrow, you know, I would accept that too. So, I mean, if even his family is not sure what to think, I mean, I'm not sure what to think either.
Yeah. Well, again, you know, like with his transition into wrestling, I know, again, a lot of people, you know, a lot of media and a lot of people just kind of mentioned they thought it was craziness. But look at all these. I mean, look at these kind of out on the edge sports performers. Look at Dennis Rodman. You know, I mean, Here he is, an NBA champion. Of course, Dennis is. I don't know. Maybe he could be an alien. It's hard to say. He's kind of a unique individual. But he moved into it. Here in Salt Lake City, Karl Malone did it for a while. I mean, there's a lot of people that moved into that. And I kind of think that he really was kind of the leader of the whole thing, if you will. He's really the first one that went, to my knowledge, that actually went out there. He was, you know, a popular actor. He was on television. I mean, he was without a doubt one of the biggest performers out there. And he moved into something quite unique. I don't think I'm not with wrestling. It's okay to watch. Do I think it's a big act? Yeah, I really think it is. It's entertainment at the end of the day. But boy, those guys got to be in good shape. And I mean, it's a heavy duty sport. It's one of those that crosses, you know, the line. But I mean, it's entertainment. But you take the average Joe and throw them in there, they'd probably last about 2 minutes, and they'd have to, you know, call 911 to get them out. So those people definitely work hard at their craft. The film. Is that still available, Chris? If our listeners want to take a look at that film as well, is that still available?
Yeah, The Death of Andy Kaufman. You can find it on Amazon, and then different stores like Walmart and Target have them available online. So yeah, it's still out there on DVD.
Interesting. I'm gonna have to pick that up, and the and your recent film too, because again. Two great subjects that you've touched upon. We've got a few minutes left. I want our listeners again to know that they can go out to your website at cryptotrip.com and pick up a copy of the DVD. Now you've got a new film coming out. You've got some new work coming out. You want to tell our listeners about that? What's going on there?
Yeah. Well, actually, just 3 days ago. Our Kickstarter campaign ended for a new short film. It ended successfully. We raised our money, and the short film is called Dogwood, and it's not a documentary. It's a narrative, and it's a real departure from what we've been talking about. It tells the story about an elderly school bus driver and a little boy in foster care who's living in a home along this guy's bus route, and how the two of them formed this sort of unlikely but redemptive friendship. So that's something that I'm going to be shooting in June in Tennessee, and we'll see where it goes from there.
It sounds like a heart-touching story. Do you have a lot of other projects lined up for down the road?
Well, as far as Crypto Trip goes, it's going to be on Destination America pretty soon. That's part of the Discovery Channel family, so that's a way that people can see it. And then, right now, kind of all of my attention is focused on Dogwood casting and that sort of thing. So yeah, there's always something.
Oh, it sounds like you're quite busy. Do you ever make it out here? Have you ever made it to the to Sundance at all?
I haven't been to Sundance yet. No, I'd love to go. Yeah, that's definitely, when Dogwood is finished, that's definitely one of the places I'll be submitting it.
Well, sounds great. Again, my hat's off to you and all the independent filmmakers. I mean, it's amazing. I will be honest with you. I never looked at the indie films or the small films or even the short films until I had a little bit of involvement with a couple of them. I mean, they never interest me, and all I can say is to listeners out there, take a look at this stuff. Look at the independent work. We get so inundated with the big science fiction films, the Star Treks and the Star Wars and all the Grammy type stuff out there, all these big stars and names, and of course the big dollars that go into making these films. But some of these small films, with people like you that they break their butt to make them, and this is just amazing work. This is what truly. To me, this is what filmmaking is all about. I never, until I had a little bit of involvement with a couple local projects, I never understood the magnitude and the dedication of the people that did this kind of work. And again, my hat's off to you for producing these type of films.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think it's more and more film is becoming independent because studios are not making their money back because these big, huge movies that are part of franchises and part of sequels come out, and they're just not, most of the time, they're just not that good.
Right.
So if people want to see a good story and something that's done with heart and done on a personal level, they have to go back to the independent movies, and that's really where it's headed right now.
The one film I saw, I don't know if you had the opportunity to see, that I kind of think is, and maybe you would agree or not, but what I think may be a foundation to getting people to look at these independent films is the one that just came out here with Bruce Dern called Nebraska. It was all filmed in black and white. And, not a high budget, you could tell. I mean, just a great film, hits home for a lot of people. And again, the simplicity was put, the filmmaking was put in, the acting was put in, the work and dedication was put into the movie, and hopefully films like that are now kind of emerging in the scheme of things, in these big productions, stuff like this. So you get actors like that come out and do those type of films, will again lead viewers to stuff like you're doing and the independent stuff. Chris, it was an honor to have you here tonight. Again, Chris's website is called cryptotrip.com. I wish you the best on Dogwood. Anything we can do to help promote it, just let us know. And keep up the good work. And I will pick up both of those films. I want to see the Crypto Trip. Looks very interesting. And thank you for all you do to from a movie standpoint, from a video standpoint, to kind of take what we do, again, totally different level, but go out there and address these fringe subjects, if you will, and put them to film. It's amazing.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, my friend, have a good weekend. Thank you so much for being here tonight. It was an honor to talk with you, and good luck.
All right. Thanks. You too. Bye-bye.
Okay, Chris. Good night.